Recording. Okay, good evening, everyone.
Hi.
So, welcome back. I'm returned from a trip to New York. I had dinner with 5,600 of my closest friends, Sunday night, and the Knesset Shluchim went really well, thank God.
Where was it? Where's the...
Yeah, so the way they do it is it starts on Thursday night. Thursday day, rather. Thursday is the beginning of the long weekend, and there's workshops the whole day Thursday, and that is done off-site at a Marriott in Brooklyn. And they rent out all these rooms for everybody to go there. Then Friday is a trip to the Rebbe's gravesite, the Ohel, and everyone together, and that's really powerful. You have all these shluchim together, and we all sign on a letter and submit the letter collectively to the Rebbe. And Rabbi Darren this year read it. Rabbi Darren from Connecticut, one of the senior shluchim, he read it. It's just a nice thing. And then Friday is another day, like half a day workshops and Shabbos, and you spend the whole Shabbos together in Crown Heights, Brooklyn. Sunday is another day of workshops, and then it's a huge marketing event because the shluchim, a lot of people are in far-flung places, and they don't have a lot of access to Jewish material, so to say, easy access. So there's a resource fair that they have on Sundays, all manner of things that people can buy, and subscribe to or get shipped to their shluchos, whatever the case may be. And then Sunday night is the banquet. So the banquet was held in what is it called? Red Hook, is that right? Brooklyn? Red Hook?
Oh, you're right. Near the docks.
So it's near the pier. So it's like Pier 6 or something was where we had it. And it's this great big hall. You can't see from end to end. This hall is so big. And it's made up with however many tables it takes. There's 10 people at a table, and there's 5,600 people there.
600 tables.
Yeah, they almost have 600 tables. And there's a media row and the big stage where all the speakers stand, while they speak. And there's screens everywhere because the hall's too big for you to see the people who are speaking. So they kind of closed circuit live broadcast what's going on, so you can see from no matter where you're sitting. And then Sunday night after the banquet, after the official banquet, then there's a big Fabrengen in 770, the shul in Crown Heights. And Monday, everyone goes back to work, so to say.
How do you fit? You can't put 5,000 people in 70.
Yeah, you can.
You can?
Yeah. It's a tight fit. You can do it.
Is there a l'chaim?
There's l'chaim, yes.
At the end, or
from the beginning, the end, the middle. Talking about a Chabad event, how could there not be l'chaim?
Did you purchase any books?
Yes, I did purchase some books. Yeah, I purchased a whole backpack full. I gave myself a wallet of cash, so I shouldn't spend more than my budget, and I had a backpack, so that way I could also limit my ability to carry. That was two tactics to instill discipline, All right, so tonight we're going to talk about truth. And an interesting debate we'll start off with is, do we always have to tell the truth? Are there circumstances where it's permissible for certain reasons, like certain outcomes that are predictable, to lie? Or do we always tell the truth? So that's the class tonight. That's going to be the topic tonight. And by the end, we'll understand about how we settle this debate about whether or not you have to always tell the truth. Well, by the end, we'll try to adopt an insight for how to deal with the world. That based on the insight that we'll get, and once we settle this question about is it always necessary to tell the truth? Can we sometimes take another path? What we'll gather from the conclusion is an insight in how to deal with the outside world, how to deal with our day-to-day struggles.
That tied to this week with the mentions, in the weekly parsha with the wives being identified as sisters instead of wives.
Yeah, we're gonna have all that in there, and we're gonna see lots of biblical precedent for this debate about when do we have to tell the truth, or how often, there are cases where we don't have to. All right, so we're gonna start tonight's lesson with a contemporary halachic question, a question of Jewish law. Now, this question of Jewish law was posed to Rabbi Ovadia Yosef, who was the Sephardic chief rabbi of Israel, a great halachic authority. And this question was posed to him by a local rabbi. So when they say ask your local Orthodox rabbi, if it's a question that's too much for your local Orthodox rabbi, usually what your local Orthodox rabbi will do is turn to an authority and matters of law for questions. That's our first text, and how we get started in this discussion is such a letter. A local rabbi is writing to a bigger rabbi on behalf of a woman of his community and to get guidance for her situation. All right, so text number 1. Let's see how the situation works. It says a young single lady had an abortion upon finding out that she was pregnant. After some time, she changed her lifestyle, became religious, settled down, and married a yeshiva student. When the happy day came and the couple was blessed with a baby boy, she now faced a serious dilemma. Her husband was planning on performing the mitzvah of Pidyon Haben, redemption of the firstborn, and performing this ceremony. This ceremony can only be performed if the newborn male is the firstborn child of the mother, excluding a case in which an abortion had been previously performed. Now, a central part of the ceremony is the recital of certain blessings that mention God's name, permissible only when it is indeed a legitimate case of Pidyon Haben. However, in this case, inasmuch as the child was not the real firstborn, reciting the blessings would in fact be a grave sin of mentioning God's name in vain.
I'm going back, I'm looking at the wording on that, and unless I'm reading it wrong, it has me confused, because it says excluding an abortion. So,
meaning like if she had an abortion, this kid is not the firstborn. Since she had an abortion, this firstborn to the father,
right,
it would be excluded from the mitzvah.
Is it defining the firstborn to the father or the firstborn to the mother?
Both. It has to be both.
It has to be for both. Okay.
Yeah.
What's the other part? Okay.
Yeah.
Got
I thought we didn't know God's name anymore.
Well, when we say the Yud and Hey and Vav and Hey, we don't say it the way it's spelled.
Right.
We say Adonai.
Right.
But that you would never get to that pronunciation from a Yud and a
Right.
Hey and a Vav and Hey.
But wasn't there a name that the high priest said during the temple?
Yeah, this
We talked
Yud,
about
Hey,
during
Vav,
the
Hey
Yom
name.
Kippur.
Yeah, and then
We
there's
don't
a
know.
longer one with 42 letters. Okay, good question. So the text continues. The lady confided to her local rabbi, asking what she should do. Is she obligated? Wow, they got here. You made it. Perseverance pays off. Look who's here.
Uh-huh.
Oh, yeah, I get you.
Okay. We're disappointed because it's going around and
No
around.
problem. It sounds like you were on time. It took a while to find the place.
Yeah.
Oh.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so we'll just do a quick recap where we're holding. So tonight's topic is about truth. And must we always tell the truth? That's the question. And once we dive into this question and answer the question, we're going to have a new insight in how to deal with our day-to-day life, a new approach, how to deal with our struggles in day-to-day life. Now, to set it up, we have a letter from a local Orthodox rabbi who's writing to the chief rabbi, the Sephardic chief rabbi of Israel, for help and guidance in a matter of Jewish law. So the matter of Jewish law, the way we've read it here, is we'll just start over again from text 1. So the young single lady had an abortion upon finding out that she was pregnant. After some time, she changed her lifestyle, became religious, settled down, and married a yeshiva student. When the happy day came and the couple was blessed with a baby boy, she now faced a serious dilemma. Her husband was planning on performing the Pidyon Haben, the redemption of the firstborn ceremony. This ceremony can only be performed if the newborn male is the firstborn child of the mother, which excludes this case in which she had an abortion. So now a central part of the ceremony is the recital of certain blessings that mention God's name. And this mention is permissible only when it is indeed a legitimate case of Bidin Haben. However, in this case, inasmuch as the child was not the real firstborn, reciting the blessings would in fact be a grave sin of mentioning God's name in vain. That's what we're up to. So now we have the conclusion of this letter, this ruling, at least for this part of it. The lady confided to her local rabbi, asking what she should do. Is she obligated to tell her husband of her previous abortion and prevent him from saying God's name in vain, all the while running the risk of ruining domestic harmony, possibly leading to strife or divorce, God forbid? Or perhaps she should remain silent and allow her husband to perform the ceremony in his innocence, thus eliminating the likely chance of domestic discord. This is our first letter. This is our first case. So here we have a clear conflict, a clear conflict between two fundamental values. On the one hand is truth, telling the truth in this situation about her past. And on the other hand, another fundamental value is peace. In this case, shalom bayis, the peace between husband and wife. So these two fundamental values, apparently in the situation, are in conflict. So that's the question. Which of these fundamental values is primary? Truth or peace? Should we always say the truth, no matter what the cost? Or do we can make a consideration for the preserving the peace and maybe not say everything that we know or everything that is true? Now, this conflict, while set up in tonight's class by a letter, and we're going to soon see the resolution to the answer, the rabbi's answer, have what to do in this case. But this conflict between truth and peace is something that plays itself out in all of our lives. We have this all the time. Now, it's almost already like a cliche, the joke of the human interaction, like, oh, the dinner was wonderful, dear, and it tasted terrible, right? But, you say it tasted wonderful. The dreaded question, how does this dress make me look? These are things that we go on and on every day. Or when your boss says, what do you think of this idea that I have? Oh no, what am I supposed to say? Now, and these are, like I said, these are like already cliches, and we joke about these regular human interactions where maybe the strict truth of what we think or how we feel isn't in our best interest or the interest of peace to divulge. Now, then it even gets more complicated, like perhaps for human interactions. You have where you're being asked a question not necessarily about you or to reveal anything about your cost, where maybe it's easy to rationalize that for the sake of preserving peace, I'll hold back. What happens when somebody, you're stuck like in the middle between two other people? So for instance, let's say you have a friend and you guys go out together and you part ways and your friend takes another detour before he goes home, or she takes a detour before she goes home. And now the spouse is calling you up and wondering where you are and when you separated and what's going on with the spouse. How much do you have to say? What should you say? Because if you say the truth, then it could cause, in this case, just like our first letter, could cause discord. It could be jeopardizing the harmony in a marriage. So are you supposed to say what you know, or are you supposed to cover for your friend, and really cover for his or her marriage? So these are all like everyday matters that we encounter, this conflict between truth and peace. So tonight's question is, which value is primary? Which value should we follow? The value of always telling the truth no matter what, or the value where truth is somewhat flexible? It depends on how you define truth, right? And we go, the primary value is peace. All right, so we see that this is actually a big question in the Torah as well. So we see in the book of Genesis, there are a few stories that we're going to soon look into the actual text of, we see there are a few occasions in the Torah itself where truth seems to be changed under the right circumstances. So first we have Abraham, and again we'll see the text, but Abraham on the way to Egypt makes a kind of a bending of the truth with his wife, Sarah, about the nature of their relationship. Now, Yitzchak in the land of Gerar does the same thing with Rivka. So we see this a pattern of behavior as far as like the changing the truth. And then the third case, towards the end of the book of Genesis, is Joseph and his brothers, Joseph's brothers, and they bend the truth about what their father said about how the brothers should get along once Yaakov passes away. So in all three cases, we're going to see soon in the text that the truth got changed a bit when it was necessary. Okay, so the first case we'll see inside is Abraham and his approach to the truth. Let's see. So it's from the book of Genesis, the 12th chapter, verses 11 through 13. And it reads, "Now it came to pass, when he drew near to come to Egypt, that Avram and Sarai," this is before their names were changed to Abraham and Sarah, so Avram and Sarai, his wife, "Behold," what did he say to her? "Behold, now I know that you are a woman of fair appearance. And it will come to pass when the Egyptians see you, that they will say, 'This is his wife,' and they will slay me and let you live. Please say that you are my sister, in order that it go well with me because of you, and that my soul may live because of you." It's a puzzling story here. The truth of the matter is they're husband and wife. But yet we see that Abraham, here in this part of the story, Abraham changes the nature of the relationship and asks Sarah to go along with this because of what he perceives as a mortal risk. If they go and tell the truth, it could be the end for him. Now, in the next text, just 15 chapters later, or 14 chapters later, in the same place in Genesis, it reads, "And Yitzchak, Isaac, dwelt in Gerar. And the men of the place asked about his wife. And he said, 'She is my sister.' Because he was afraid to say, 'She is my wife,' because he said, 'Lest the men of the place kill me because of Rebekah or Rivka, for she is of beautiful appearance.'" Same scenario, almost word for word the same scenario. Because she's so attractive, he's at mortal risk. Because of that, they might just kill him to get him out of the way. And so instead of wife, say you're my sister. So now we have one more story. This is the Yosef story, which we saw before. Now, Yosef's brothers saw that their father had died. And they said, "Perhaps Yosef will hate us and return to us all the evil that we did to him." So they commanded messengers to go to Yosef to say, "Your father commanded us before his death, saying, 'So shall you say to Joseph, please forgive now your brother's transgression and their sin, for they did evil to you. Now please forgive the transgression of the servants of the God of your father.' Yosef wept when they spoke to him." Now, okay, this is already like a little bit deeper biblical trivia. How do we know that this is an obvious lie? We, the readers of the story that know more than the brothers and Yosef know, how do we know that this is an obvious lie?
Because the father isn't dead.
The father is dead. That part's true.
Well, Joseph had been in touch with his father at some point before this, and it would have come up. I presume.
Okay, that's one way. That's a good approach. That Yosef probably would have known what Yaakov's wishes were before he passed away.
Because he never told them. They never told him.
Okay, a similar approach. This from the other side. We have no record of Yaakov saying this to the brothers or to Yosef or on behalf of the brothers, to Yosef.
And they never told what they did to him. They never told the father what they did to the brother.
Right.
There you go. That's the deeper answer I was looking for. When Yosef went missing, don't forget that the brothers told Yaakov that he was seized by an animal. They even had physical evidence to prove it. Remember, they had his special coat with blood. And they never came clean to Yaakov that they did this to their brother. So Yaakov went to his grave never knowing that his own son did this to Yosef. How could he have given a message telling Yosef to forgive them for what they did if he never knew that? Okay, so Nachmanides explains this concept also a little bit. Nachmanides, the Ramban, in his explanation there on the verse, it says, according to the plain reading of the text, Yaakov never found out that his brothers sold Yosef. Rather, he thought that Yosef, while wandering in the field, was kidnapped and sold as a slave to Egypt. The brothers were afraid to reveal to Yaakov what really happened, lest he curse them for their misdeeds. This is also evidence in the fact that the brothers told Yosef that their father commanded them to tell them the message, and Yaakov himself didn't command Yosef, for Yaakov never knew of the story. So you guys all got it right. You know, all three pieces came together. Very good. Okay, so perhaps the most blatant act of deceit, we already introduced like 3 cases where the truth was changed under certain circumstances in the Torah. The most blatant act of deceit takes place when Yaakov tricks his father Yitzchak into giving him the blessings that were meant for his brother Esau. You've got this whole triangle of deceit and things going on here. Yaakov, and if we review the story, Yaakov thinks that his end is close, and he wants to bless his firstborn. So he tells Esau to go and hunt him some food that he likes, because by eating the food, he'll be in the proper frame of mind to give prophecy and blessing to Esau. So while Esau is out fulfilling this task of hunting, Rivka and Yaakov spring into action. Rivka doesn't want Esau to get the blessing. She wants Yaakov to get the blessing. So she gets in a whole scheme to trick Yitzchak, who's blind at this point, to trick Yitzchak into giving the blessings that he means to give to Esau over to Yaakov. Now, how does she do this? She knows what her husband likes to eat. She quickly prepares it without needing to hunt from the food they have in their home. And then she dresses Yaakov up in Esau's clothes and even puts fur on his hands to give it. He was smooth-skinned and Esau was hairy, and go for it. Sends him in for this mission to take the blessing. Now, here, the Torah itself describes the act as deceitful. It uses a word to say that it was untrue, what they did. So that's text 4a from the 27th chapter of Bereshis, 27th chapter of Genesis, verses 15 through 19. Then Rivka took the costly garments of Esau, her elder son, which were with her in the house, and she dressed Yaakov, her younger son. And the hides of the kids she put on his hands and on the smoothness of his neck. And she gave the tasty foods and the bread that she had made into the hand of Yaakov, her son. And he came to his father and said, "My father." And he said, "Here I am. Who are you, my son?" And Yaakov said to his father, "I am Esau, your firstborn. I have done as you have spoken to me. Please rise, sit down, and eat of my game, so that your soul will bless me." And here we see Yitzchak calling Yaakov out on his ploy in the next text. The next text, 4b, when Esau comes back, so that, jump ahead a few verses, Yaakov already gets the blessing, then he leaves, and Esau, not being unaware of the whole scheme, comes back faithfully to bring the meal to his father and receive his blessing. And he is sad to hear when that Yitzchak says, "Your brother came with trickery and took your blessing. The Hebrew word is mirma. So it's sometimes translated as cunning, sometimes translated as deceit. Here they're being very nice, that it's translated as trickery. That's maybe like the least the strong connotation of the word, the way it's translated. But you have this concept of mirma. Now, I am Esav, your firstborn. That isn't true. When he identifies himself as Esav, it's Yaakov saying that. I have here furry hands, you can see. So he says an untruth. So the question is, why? Why when we read this episode, why do we read all these stories, why do they do these things in untrue ways? Why do they present themselves as who they're not? Why do they present themselves in relationships that they're not in? So, and if we've been asking this first question, truth versus peace, and we see many examples now of truth being bended for various circumstances, is this permissible? Is this a permissible approach? Is this allowed to bend the truth this way? All right, so let's see. Rebbe Rashab, the fifth Lubavitcher Rebbe, will sum up all of these questions, and it reads as follows. This is from Sefer Maimarim of the year 5668, so it's the fifth Lubavitcher Rebbe. It says, Rivka and Yaakov, Rebekah and Jacob acted in a crooked manner, dressing Jacob in Esav's clothes and pretending to be Esav. Why was all of this necessary? Why did it have to be that the firstborn blessings should come in a crooked way? Now, the last text of the first section, what we're going to see is that really this created a whole environment or a whole way of being, a way of acting that ended up coming back to Yaakov as well. And we're going to see from classic rabbinic sources that it's almost like it's getting back at Yaakov for this course of action. And he got what they call the expression, the taste of his own medicine, and various events that happened later in his life as well. So the first episode, text 6a, the Medrash talks about it, says when he got married. Right? So you were talking before about marrying the sisters. So the entire wedding night, when Yaakov got married, Leah pretended she was Rachel. And in the morning, Yaakov realized that it was in fact Leah, so he asked her, "Why did you deceive me?" Leah countered him, saying, "Why did you deceive your father when you pretended to be Esau? And now you are the one who dares to ask, why did you deceive me?" So we see it's turned around on him. He's experiencing the same thing that was done to him. Now the second incident over here.
Is that the Talmud you were reading?
That's the Medrash.
But that's not the Torah.
It's the Torah like the Talmud is. It's the oral tradition.
Okay, because I don't remember ever seeing that in the Parsha.
No, this isn't. This is the story, the oral tradition, the oral part of the story. Now the Baal Turim and describes over here, the verse states, and the children of Yaakov acted with cunning. This word is mirma. Yaakov approached his father cunningly, so his own son approached him cunningly. So we see in early after, the next story after he tricks his father, that's when he gets tricked by Leah, and at the end of his life, when he tricks his father, now his sons are tricking him. So the purpose of the Medrash, purpose of these sources in the rabbinic literature explaining this outcome from his mirma, from his deceit, is not that he was punished measure for measure. But rather the idea over here is that by Yaakov acting in this way, in a way which is cunning, in a way of mirma, he was making it legitimate. He was giving it a certain acceptability to act this way. And this created a pattern of behavior that got back to him. So this word mirma, Yaakov is the one who started it, and by starting it, he legitimized it, and then it comes back to him through the sources we just read. So this brings us to like our bigger question at the end of 1. If we first ask the question truth versus peace, then we listed all these examples where truth was bent, and we're going to have to figure out how and why. But if we can answer the questions of why, the question will be, well then, even if you have a reason why to bend the truth, why did we have to go this way for the outcome? Maybe there were alternative ways that could have accomplished the same thing without going in mirma, without going in this crooked way. Now again, once we answer all these questions, the point is that we're going to see there's a certain positive utility for the approach that Yaakov used. This cunning, this deceit, actually has within it something positive that we can use in our day-to-day life. But before we get to the lesson, we have to dig a little bit deeper into understanding how and why these things happen the way they did. All right, any questions so far about truth versus peace? Any questions from home? This is your chance to make an orange bubble. All right, so no questions. Okay, so the next text is from the Talmud, the tractate Ksubos, which deals with the marriage contract. And the Talmud itself is going to deliberate about this debate of truth versus peace. So let's see the deliberation. Our rabbis taught, how does one dance before the bride? Ketzad merakbin lifnei hakala. So Rashi explains what that means, what the question is being asked. What do you tell her? Meaning, so imagine what's going on over here. You have a marriage celebration, and a young couple just got married, and there's a mitzvah of bringing joy to the bride and groom on the day of their wedding. So how do you dance before them? That's a euphemistic sort of question like Rashi is explaining. I mean, like, how do you address them? What do you say to the bride and groom in order to bring them joy on this special day? So Beis Shammai says, you tell the bride, you say to the bride as she is. What do you say? Another one of these expressions, I tell it how I see it, right? So that's what Beis Shammai. Beis Hillel said, you should say a beautiful and graceful bride. That's what you should say. So Beis Shammai says to Beis Hillel, if she was lame or blind, does one say of her, beautiful and graceful bride? The Torah says, keep away from a lie. It's an explicit commandment, right, in the Torah. Stay far away from lies. This one's beautiful and graceful. You can't say that. Beis Hillel said to Beis Shammai, according to your words, if one has made a bad purchase in the market, should one praise it in front of him or denigrate it? Surely one should praise it in front of him. So, let's make it more clear. Let's say, you go out and buy yourself a tie, and it's awful, and you come to your wife and you ask, oh, look at this great deal I got on this tie, it was only like, it was half off, and what a great deal. Is your wife supposed to say, but that's the reason it was half off is because it's hideous, or she'll say, yeah, it's a great deal, you're such a good shopper, it's a beautiful tie, good job. What are you supposed to say? So, according to Beis Hillel, you should praise this purchase right in front of the person. So the sages said, one should always have a pleasing disposition in front of other people. So Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai are in this Gemara, in this piece of Talmud, arguing over two cases. Now, the first case is what's called the unbecoming bride. So on the day of the wedding, are you supposed to say it the way it's true? Are you supposed to say the bride as you see it? And this ill-advised purchase, are you supposed to tell the guy, really what you bought was a bad deal? So in both cases, it is, again, a human interaction. What are friends supposed to say to friends? Now, Shammai is saying, on one side of this debate, truth versus peace, is that we have our ideals. Truth is of primary importance. Stay far away from a lie. Beis Hillel says you should be kind. You should be compassionate. You should change the truth in order to uphold peace. What do I think of the bride? She's beautiful and graceful. What do I think of that purchase? What a nice tie. It looks great on you, you know? That's what the Beis Hillel says you're supposed to do. Now, in this case, in Tractate Ksubos of the Gemara, we don't get a resolution about Shammai and Hillel. Which opinion are we supposed to go according to? What's the final law? But we do have other places in the Talmud which seem to support Beis Hillel's approach, the way of peace. That's the next text. Actually, I'll go through a slide. We have the nice image over here of the bride. And in our first text here in the second part, text 7, we quote that one should always have a pleasing disposition in front of other people. But we're still left with our question at this point, should we stay far away from a lie, or should we bend the truth to uphold peace? All right, so let's see if we can get an answer in the next text. The next text is from Tractate Yevamos. Yevamos is in the same category, same topic at hand over here, but Yevamos Yibum is what we call the Levirate marriage, right? You guys heard of this? The rule of Levirate marriage is when a young couple are without do not have a child, and the husband dies before they have a child. If the husband has a brother that's alive when he dies, then there's a mitzvah for the brother to marry the widow in order to have children in his deceased brother's name. Now, so that's Yibum. So the whole biblical commandment of Yibum is addressed in this tractate of Yevamos. But back to our case, let's see what's going on over here. Ilya said, in the name of Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon, a person may edit what has been said for the sake of peace. And how do we know this? As Joseph's brothers said, your father commanded, please forgive. So that's already, we're familiar with that story from part 1. So the Talmud is actually using that example, that story, as an example for it's okay to bend the truth. Now, Rabbi Nosson says, not only is this an example, but the bending the truth this is a commandment. As it is written, Shmuel said, how can I go? If Shaul hears it, he will kill me. Okay, so let's talk about that story. What's going on over there? Shmuel, Shaul, what's going on? Shmuel is the prophet, right? Samuel, the prophet, Shmuel Hanavi. And he's the one who anointed the first Jewish king, Shaul. Now, we know there ends up being a pretty murky story between Shaul and the second king, David. He's his son-in-law. It's a really bad relationship. It gets violent. And Shmuel, the prophet, kind of gets stuck in the middle. Because while Shaul is still alive and acting as the king, God tells Shmuel, the prophet, to go and anoint David as the new king. Now, just some of the backstory. Shaul's already tried to kill King David multiple times. So this would be seen as a treasonous act for Shmuel to go and anoint King David as the king while Shaul is still alive. And Shmuel knows that Shaul's not so rational about this whole thing. He's like, if I do this, I'll be killed. So God tells him, go anyways, anoint King David. And if Shaul asks where you were, just say that you were going to get animals to offer as a sacrifice. So it was God's idea in the story to tell Shmuel to change the story if you're confronted by Shaul. So Gemara brings that as not just that we have an example of it, but it's a mitzvah. God himself commands people to bend the truth. The Gemara continues, the school of Rabbi Shmuel taught, peace is so important that even God altered what was said for its sake. Meaning, God doesn't only tell people to lie or bend the truth. God himself does it. At first, Sarah said, when she heard the news that she was going to have a baby at such an advanced stage, she laughed and said, my husband is old. And afterwards, when God repeats over Sarah's words To Abraham, it says, I am old. So she, instead of laughing and saying, my husband is old, when God tells over the story, he says that's why Sarah laughing and saying that I'm old, that Sarah is old. So that's not what she said. So we see not just that there's a biblical precedent for it by the brothers doing it, but there's even biblical precedent for God commanding others to do it. And then really the strongest biblical precedent is that God himself, in his words to Abraham, bent the truth in order to preserve peace. So it seems from the way this Gemara approaches the question that it's clear that Beis Hillel had the right approach. In certain cases, for the sake of peace, we can change the truth. Okay, so now, just to make it crystal clear, the next text number 9, actually we'll just skip over this. Text number 9 is from the Code of Jewish Law, Shulchan Aruch, and it reads, if one is deathly ill, we tell him, repent for your past actions, and that alone should stand you in good stead for long life. Now, why do we do this? So the Shulchan Aruch says parenthetically to calm him down, even though we know that it is very likely he's going to die. So here again, the Shulchan Aruch as a Code of Jewish Law telling us how we should behave is that you should tell people even on the day that they're going to die to do tshuva. Why? Because you're going to live a long life. This placebo effect, that we're hoping that we're going to activate, is going to give them a certain peace that they think there's still hope, even when you yourself know that there isn't hope. But the law, the Code of Jewish Law tells us to inject this changed truth for the sake of this person's well-being. So what we see from part 2 is that when it comes to the body of Jewish literature, like the Talmud and the Code of Jewish Law, there are times when peace trumps truth. I don't know. It's tough. It's like, do I have to strike that from my vocabulary?
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm in mixed company. Am I allowed to use that word as a verb? Especially when we're talking about truth. Do I have to? Okay, no more political jokes. All right. So now we've come up with a legal answer. So the next section we're going to talk about the ethics, the morality of changing the truth. Maybe it's allowed legally, but how is it right to do this? Okay, so let's learn about the next case. So the idea over here is that there's truth and there's a lie, and then there's a spectrum between. That it's not so black and white that the opposite of truth is a lie. So the idea over here is that a lie, by definition, is something which is harmful. When we're told, when Beis Shammai says, stay far away from sheker, from a lie, that lie has actually a meaning. It's not just an untruth. A lie has a meaning of something which is destructive, something which is harmful when told. Okay, so let's see how this works. So you have the Yereim, Rabbi Elazar ben Shmuel, who was the Sefer Yereim, and he writes, when the Torah says, keep away from a lie, which was what the Shammai quoted, the intent is to keep away from lies which can harm or hurt someone else. However, lies that do not lead to negativity are not included in the Torah's prescription. This is understood. How do we learn this? How do we redefine lies? Where do you get the latitude to do this? It says, understood from the context of the verse that states, distance yourself from falsehood. The second half of the verse says, do not kill an innocent or righteous man. Now, there's one way to read this, before we learn the Yereim, is that lying is just as bad as murder, right? you might take such a strong approach to how primary truth is, the way Shammai did, because you might say, well, look what its neighbor is. If you tell a lie, that's like killing somebody. So the Uraim has a novel way of learning this verse. The Uraim is saying, rather than lumping them together, associating them to show the severity of a lie, by saying in the second half of the verse that you shouldn't kill people, which is the most extreme form of destructive act, then that's a qualifier to help us define what it means to keep away from something which is a lie. A lie is defined by the second half of the verse, by the context, as something which is destructive. It's qualified. If it's not destructive, then it's not the type of lie that we have to keep away from. That's the way the Uraim learns this verse. That from the context of the second half of the verse, we know what is forbidden as a lie, only untruths which are destructive. Now, not everybody agrees with this. It's a good debate, right? Hillel and Shammai have read these verses also in the Torah. So not everybody agrees with this. And the idea over here is what we might call like the slippery slope phenomenon, right? Once you start doing something wrong, it just paves the way to greater and greater descent into wrongdoing. So the idea over here is that rather than get into a cycle of lies, the reason we're told to stay away from lies is because you don't want to get on to that slippery slope of lying. So the next text is from the Rabbeinu Yonah, from the Mishnah of Perkei over there in the first chapter. He says, the sages tell us that even when simply recounting an event, it should be said truthfully. For when a person accustoms himself to lying, he will not be able to say the truth because he's so used to lying. Now, so here he's saying, even though theoretically, even though you might have a clever way to learn the verse, and you may even have biblical precedent to show that there's occasions where it's okay, if there's no harm done, to lie, but the other approach is that it's so destructive to get into the habit of lying that it's better, even if it's allowed, not to do it. Now, the Rabbeinu Yonah, as a proof to this idea, cites the following story, which we're going to show up here on the board, and you have in your handout. Rav was constantly tormented by his wife. Not all the domestic relationships in the Talmud are good, right? So Rav had a tough time with his wife. If he told her, prepare me lentils, she would prepare him small peas. And if he asked her for small peas, then she prepared him lentils. Right? She did, despite him, the opposite of what he asked for. When his son Chia grew up, he gave her his father's instructions in the reverse order. And since he figured everything that his dad says comes out backwards when mom does it, whatever dad asks for, I'm just going to say it backwards in the beginning. That way mom is actually going to give dad exactly what he wants. That's Chia's intervention. Your mother, Rob once remarked to him, she's improved. Things are going much better with mom, that's what Rob tells his son Chia. Chia said, it was I, the son replied, who reversed your orders to her. So here we see Chia is learning the way we learned in part 2. He's changing the truth in order to preserve domestic tranquility. And we see it works, right? Rob is happy. Look how much better things are going between me and my wife, wow. And then Chia lets the cat out of the bag, as they say. It was really me who did it all the time. I knew this was going on. This is what people say, Rob said to him. Your own offspring teaches you reason. Wow. You, however, must not continue to do so. For it is said, they have taught their tongue to speak lies. They weary themselves. So he quotes from a verse and saying, even though the outcome was domestic harmony of these untruths, and even though Rav realized, this is a smart way to do it, I should start asking for for beans when I want lentils, you know? That's pretty smart. So he picked up on that. But for you, don't keep doing it because you should stay far away from a lie. And that's the proof that Rabbeinu Yonah used when he said, even though it might be permissible, you stay far away from lies. So this truth-peace dilemma, we have, by definition, we've redefined lying from the biblical verse and saying that a lie, when we say to stay far away from a lie, is qualified by something which is harmful. But even though we have this limud, this way of learning, so that it's permissible, we still don't want to do it because lying gets us into a downward spiral. Lying is a habit. So we're back to our moral question of what we've already established legally that it's allowed, but our question is, if it's a bad habit, if it's destructive behavior, even if it's going to end up being good for the people that hear our lies, why is it okay? What's the morality, the ethics behind lying? All right. So now we have another medrash, text 13. The medrash in Bereshis Rabbah says, when God set out to create man, there was a tumult in the heavens. Some of the angels said, do not create man, while others said, create man, right? So there's a big fight going on in heaven when God had this idea to create man. This is what the verse is referring to when it says, truth will sprout from the earth, and righteousness will look down from heaven. Kindness said, so the attribute of kindness comes to weigh in on the debate, and says, create man, for he will perform acts of kindness. And this merits, right? It's worth it to create man. Truth said, do not create man, for they're full of lies. So it's this weakness, why it's just not worth it, according to the attribute of truth. So what did God do? He took hold of truth and flung him to the ground. And this is what the verse is referring to when it says in the book of Daniel, and truth was thrown to the ground. So the medrash is it's a puzzling medrash. What's going on over here? Debate in heaven, truth and kindness are talking. You know, it's a very kind of puzzling medrash. But the medrash is teaching us a profound lesson. Once we kind of sort through the puzzling language, the medrash is teaching us a very profound lesson. Truth is important, but we have other values that are even higher than truth. Like kindness, like peace. So truth is important, and we want to stay far away from a lie and the habit that's the destructive habit of lying, but life is complicated. The world isn't always so simple that it's just truth or lie, you know. So we have over here peace as a virtue is superior to truth. So we have a repeat of our medrash in text 13 and the conclusion that God took truth and flung it down to the ground. The truth is important, but we have values which are higher. Okay, now one thing which is another takeaway on this one here on the slide from this medrash is it doesn't teach us that in any way to diminish the importance of truth. By God flinging truth down to the ground, it shows to what extent or how great and important is the attribute of peace and the attribute of kindness. Not to belittle or diminish truth, just the opposite. We see how important it is. But we're learning a lesson about life that you can have competing priorities, and the top priority in this case is to be kind, is to be peaceful. Okay, so let's see another text from the Talmud. This is from Tractate Brachos. And it says, great is the duty of honoring one's fellow creatures, since it sets aside a prohibition enjoined by the Torah. The verse states, and hide yourself from them, which means that there are times when you may hide yourself from them, and times when you must not hide yourself from them. So what are we hiding from over here? The idea is that whenever you see a lost object, especially like a lost animal of somebody that you know is theirs and it's lost, you can't hide yourself from the responsibility of returning the lost article to the person who lost it. You know, I don't know if you guys have done this, but like you found a watch or something. You don't know whose it is. And it's like you've now taken on a master because you found the watch. You know? Like now you're going to be preoccupied for a while figuring out what's the best way I can announce that this thing is lost and how do I find out whose it is and how do I make sure it's theirs, like with testing them with signs and all that kind of stuff, and then give it back to them and all these type of things and make sure it doesn't get broken by my kids, you know, I have to keep it in a safe place, all that kind of stuff. Finding something is complicated in Torah. So normally we're told that you shouldn't hide yourself. You should take on this responsibility, this mitzvah. But there are certain times when you can hide yourself from them. So that's what the Gemara continues. How can this be? How could it be that you hide yourself from this mitzvah when it says not to? So the answers. If he was a Kohen and the straying animal was in a cemetery, a Kohen's not allowed to go. Or he was an elder and it was derogatory to his dignity to be seen leading the animal back. Or his work was more important than his neighbor's. Therefore, it is stated, and hide yourself. Meaning there's two options. We both see this animal running across the street, and like, okay, whose time is more important right now? So the more important person can leave it to the other one to go do. So in all of these cases, as the Talmud is teaching us, is that we do give consideration to a person's dignity, to a person's feelings, to a person's position. And even though there's a mitzvah to return lost objects, if it's beneath the dignity, if beneath the position of a person, this respect for them are values, which in this case are greater than the value to return lost objects. So the idea which is telling us is that life, again, to say it in simple language, life is complicated. And you can be what's called in the Talmud a chassid shoite, a foolish righteous person, which means what you're doing according to the letter of the law may be true and righteous, but without the sensitivity to understand what's most important right now, then you can be a fool. So the example which the Gemara brings is of the chassid shoite, the righteous fool, is a person. There's a prohibition of not have physical contact between genders, unless you're married or part of the family. So men don't shake hands and hug and touch women and vice versa. So the example which the Gemara brings of a chassid shoite is a woman is drowning. And you see that she's drowning, and you're walking by the river, and you're a man, and you say, well, I can't touch her. So that's a fool. Like, there is a prohibition against touching a woman, but she's drowning, and you have to save her life. So if you are so righteous that you won't touch her, so you don't jump into the water to save her life, then you're a fool. You're a righteous fool. It may be true that you can't touch her, but that's not what's primary right now. So when we have this truth versus peace dilemma, truth is certainly important. But we have to realize that life is complicated and there are certain times when truth is not the most important thing, even though it's important. And this is the other example. It's not truth versus peace, but it's property law and the value of property and human dignity. Which is more important? So returning property is certainly important, but it's not more important than preserving self-respect and human dignity. We don't belittle or diminish a person just for the sake of the value of property. So this is what the Medrash is teaching us, is that we have to develop a certain sensitivity to understand what's most important, what's the right thing to do. Now, this is the qualifying statement. Don't take the lesson away from tonight's class that Rabbi Stein told me I could lie whenever I needed to. Okay. I just learned a great thing, I even have it on tape. The rabbi said we could lie. as long as we're wise about it or something. I don't forget what he said, but it turns out we could lie. That's not what I'm saying. Okay, so you can't just do it for whatever perceived purpose you have and what is more important to you. You do need to have guidance. It's good to have an objective, second opinion. So a trusted friend, a wise person, a local Orthodox rabbi, like I mentioned earlier in the class. If you feel like you're in a situation where it's a dilemma between truth and peace, get a second opinion before you go and lie. Okay, that's the qualifying statement. Now, let's go back to our forefathers. We said before when we had this truth-peace dilemma, we brought up the names of Yitzchak and Abraham, and we brought up Yaakov, certainly, in all these cases. So what's going on? They all changed the truth. So this wasn't a lapse in their ethics or morals. This wasn't a stumbling and doing what's right or what's wrong. What we see is that after we just learned in the Talmud, life is complicated, the world is complicated, the forefathers understood this certainly. And they employed a sophisticated moral compass. They used a sophisticated moral compass in order to navigate this complicated life, this complicated world that we live in. Now, the next text is from the Talmud, which says this in plain language. One is permitted to change the truth for the sake of peace, as we see from the story of the brothers lying to Yosef. So, the brothers lied to Yosef. Yaakov tricked Yitzchak. Yitzchak and Abraham said about their wives. All of these things were in this permissible activity. Now, I said we were going to come back to solve the problem of our first dilemma. Remember, what's our first dilemma?
About the abortion?
Yeah, about the woman who had an abortion. What was the dilemma?
That's domestic.
Good, to tell her husband or not.
Versus practicality.
Good, exactly. So let's see what the conclusion of that case was. It says the prohibition of making a blessing in vain is of a rabbinic nature. Therefore, better that she should remain silent so as not to create a situation of legitimate concern that the husband might look for a divorce. Or at the very least, there will be disharmony and fighting in the house, shaming the woman. Better to allow the father to perform the ceremony with the appropriate blessings, for great is human dignity that it even overrides biblical prohibitions. So far what we've gone through then tonight when we talk about truth versus peace is we've approached it from a technical perspective, how does it work exactly in all these cases. We've talked about it in a legal perspective and that it's permissible. We've even talked about it from an ethical and a moral perspective, that as a sensitive person in a complicated world, you have to realize that there are competing priorities, and you have to know which one is primary. And just because something is right doesn't mean it's true, to borrow from the word of the night. So that leaves us with one last question, which we've asked already in tonight's class, which is, okay, let's take Rivka and Yaakov, and they're tricking Yitzchak to get the blessing. Rivka had a good relationship with her husband. They loved each other. They were married a long time. If she saw that her husband was going to do something which she thought was the wrong thing, why couldn't she just come to him straight? Why couldn't she have just said, this is a big issue, we need to talk about it, family meeting, and work this out? Why did she have to go in this crooked path in order to accomplish this? After we've gone through this whole analysis of truth and lies and how it works, we now understand things aren't so simple. But maybe it could have been simple. Why didn't she just go to the straight path right to him? In order to understand, this is the last point of the night, in order to understand why she took the crooked path, we're going to kind of come to a conclusion, according to teachings of Chassidus, that there are pretty much everyday events which require each and every one of us to adopt this crooked path. The reason Rivka and Yaakov, Chassidus is going to explain, took this indirect route is in order to show us a lesson, in order to teach us a lesson on how we also have to adopt the crooked path sometimes. There is a very positive way. It's so positive, you could say it according to Chassidus, that it helps you accomplish your mission and purpose of being. Not only your mission and purpose, but the entire mission and purpose of creation is accomplished when we adopt this crooked path. That's why they did it. So let's see how that works. This is the final point of the night. Now, Rivka and Yaakov, as a biblical narrative, we're taught in Chassidus, are actually, they're part of a much bigger story. See, Yaakov and Esav, these twin brothers, Chassidus teach us, symbolize something much larger than sibling rivalry. In fact, Yaakov and Esav represent the struggle between holiness and materiality. The struggle between spirituality and physicality. And when the blessing is said to the brothers that when one will be dominant, the other one will be being dominated, then this is the struggle to find this balance between spirituality, Yaakov, and physicality, Esav. Now the task of souls and bodies in this world is to refine and uplift the physicality of the world, the very physical nature of the world, to refine it and uplift it, that it should be a dwelling place for God. This is what Chassidus teaches and from Kabbalah, that the whole reason God made this spectacular project is in order so that we here can transform physicality so there should be a home for the revelation of God. So this struggle that we're going through today is symbolized by the struggle of Yaakov and Esav. When we go out to work tomorrow, right, and we show up and we make a deal and we conduct ourselves in an involvement with the world, that is Yaakov, our soul, going into the realm of Esav. And our mission is to transform it so that our relationships and our homes and our family life and our workplace and our sphere of influence is transformed. Now, what the story of Yaakov that we're analyzing here tonight teaches us is that sometimes, in order to be successful in our mission, we have to take off the clothes of Yaakov, right? We have to take off our talis and take off our tefillin and take off and put down our siddur for a second. That's how Yaakov normally behaves. And we have to put on the clothes of Esav. Right? In the story, what did he do? He took Esav's nice clothes, he put on Esav's furry arms, and he went in there and acted just like Esav. So we can't hide in shul. We can't hide in a holy book and hope to change the world. What the story of Yaakov is telling us is that sometimes we're going to have to act like Esav in order to change the world. Sometimes we're going to have to go out in the world and have a job and deal with people. And that's Esav's domain. That's the world. That's physicality. But this story is telling us sometimes we're going to have to act just like Esav in order to accomplish our mission. We can't.
The expression has something. You have to get your hands dirty.
You have to get your hands dirty, exactly. We can't hide from the spiritual challenge that comes from being in contact with the world. Now, this is a powerful lesson. It's not intuitive. Lots of approaches to spirituality say just the opposite. If you want to change the world and be an elevated being, you've got to go away from the world. You know, you have to be up on top of a mountain and be meditating 25 hours a day, because this isn't going to work, that you're going to be an elevated being in the middle of Manhattan. That's just not, these two other things don't fit. But no, Judaism says that's not the mission. The mission isn't to lead the world. The mission is to change the world. And in order to change the world, you're going to have to go into the world. And in order to go into the world successfully, you might have to dress up and act like Esav. Now, acting like Esav, that's what we mean by this crooked path. So let's see the next text. The next text is from L'Kutei Sichos. It's from the teaching of Lubavitcher Rebbe, which is where a lot of tonight's class is based off of. This teaching of Lubavitcher Rebbe, it says, to receive the blessings, Rivka acted in cunning, and Yaakov dressed in Esav's clothes, which were originally Nimrod's clothing, a man who rallied all to rebel against God. So these clothes had a history. But the lesson for us is clear. The approach of a Jew to mundane matters has to be one of cunning. On the surface, he's engaged in mundane affairs, eating, drinking, all the things that are maybe even more mundane than that. But his real intention is for God's sake. Granted, he wears the clothes of Esav, but his intention is to refine the sparks of holiness that are to be found in the mundane. So, this is step number one. Step number one of why we have to go in this crooked path, why we have to dress up and be different and not ourselves and the kind of things, is because that's how you're going to change the world. Now, there's another important reason as to why we have to go the crooked way. We have to do this cunning approach. And this is in order to beat the evil inclination at its own game. See, the evil inclination, the Yetzer Hara, as you say it in Hebrew. The Yetzer Hara, it works by cunning. It works by deceiving us. So let's say an example like this. Let's say that going to pray, that's not really your thing, right? It's hard. It's sitting with a book and a sitter and it's a foreign language. You're not sure what you're doing. You're standing up. You're sitting down. You're talking. You're not talking. What's going on? And maybe it's not the most natural spiritual experience for you to sit and pray every day, 3 times a day. You have a struggle. But it's the right thing to do, right? It's a mitzvah. So the Yetzer Hara will come along and say, so now imagine, none of you guys are, I'm not talking about anybody here, of course. Just picked a faraway challenge that none of us can relate to, so no one should be offended. What?
Don't lie.
But
for peace.
Yeah. So Shabbos, right? That's the work and congregational. It's a big thing. It's coming times to daven, but you might be the kind of person who's struggling with connection through prayer. It comes time to daven on Shabbos. It's time to go to shul. And all of a sudden, the Yetzer Hara comes along and says, but Shabbos is also a day to rest. You need to gather your strength, so maybe you should sleep in a little bit extra. So now you're already late for shul. Yetzer Hara got round one. So then you finally wake up and you had your rest, because that's what Shabbos is for, obviously. And you've got to work hard, on Monday, so of course you should take care of your health. Yetzer Hara convinced you of that. Now you wake up and it's time, you'll go a little late, but it's also a day to be with your family. The kids are home from school. Your spouse doesn't have work either. Maybe this is the perfect opportunity to spend quality time together as a family. How about instead of going to shul, we should go on a bike ride, or go to the park. Do something together as a family. It sounds right, doesn't it? It sounds good. That's a holy way to spend your time, and Shabbos is with your family. Now the Yetzer Hara won round 2. Because now you're not going. Now, a deep idea that Chassidus talks about, that we talk about, it's not the topic of tonight's class, but just on the side, there it talks about how we can know what type of thing is important for us to be doing in our divine service by the very fact that it's hard for us to do. If you have 2 options of a mitzvah looking in front of you right now, I have 2 things I could be possibly doing right now. The one that you don't want to do is most likely the one that you should do. Because it's a sign. The fact that you don't want to do it, you don't like it, is that's the work that's needed from you now to grow. If it's easy for you to do, it's probably not that important for you to accomplish it between these two options. So the Yetzer Hara comes when you're weakest. In this example, it's prayer, and in a very cunning way convinces you to do two things that sound perfectly good. Rest on Shabbos and spend time with your family. Who could say that that's a bad idea? So the Yetzer Hara wins. That's the approach of the Yetzer Hara, is to be cunning. I think the terminology, not amongst rabbis, but the terminology they talk about is rationalization, right? You rationalize the things that you want to do anyways. The Yetzer Hara, that's like they're one of their main tools of the evil inclination, is rationalization, cunning. So this second lesson from tonight is the crooked path is important, because when we use the crooked path for holiness, this undercuts the main tool of the Yetzer Hara. We're beating the Yetzer Hara at his own game. That's the next text over here. Oh, sorry. Before we go further, the part we talked about over here, got to go out and act like Esav, right? All your laptops and calculators and stuff going on, keeping yourself busy. The whole point of going into the world is to change it, release the sparks of holiness, to transform the world. But we have to do that sometimes by dressing up like Esav. That's the visual image which reinforces the first point. Now, the second point is here in the text about using the Yetzer Hara's best tool against him. The reason Yitzchak's blessings had to come about in a way of deceit specifically is because the sparks of holiness fell into this world through the sin of eating the forbidden fruits. Something the snake orchestrated with slyness. As it is stated, the snake was cunning. This is another one of these symbolic images. The snake symbolizes each and every one of us as Yetzer Hara. So therefore, the way for Yaakov to uplift these sparks was to receive the blessings from Yitzchak through slyness. As the verse says, but with a perverse one, you deal crookedly. So here we're talking about who's the perverse one, the Yetzer Hara. So in order to work around and undercut the Yetzer Hara, we use this same type of crookedness. All right, so that's the lesson for tonight. The lesson for tonight is that okay, let's just do a quick review. Truth versus peace. It's a conflict which we all face all the time. Truth and peace are both fundamental values in Judaism. So what we found after the analysis is that you can bend the truth, you can change the truth for the sake of peace. You can do it legally, and you can do it morally when it's in the right conditions and if it's for the right reasons. Because you're prioritizing greater values like peace and kindness. Then we talked about this final idea, which is that the reason why we have this story, the reason why the story is preserved for us to be talking about thousands of years later, this crooked, curious story of Rivka and Yaakov tricking Yitzchak and to get the blessing, the reason we learn this until today is in order to teach us a very powerful approach to accomplishing our mission in life. The crooked path of this story is our job as Yaakov to transform Esav. That the crooked path is maybe the best, most effective way to go out into the world in order to change it. Now, again, when we say crooked path, we're speaking proverbially, right? We're not. Again, I'm making a qualified statement because it's being recorded. I'm not telling you to go out in the world and cheat people. What I'm saying by crooked path is that go and be honest at business, but in order to be transformative while being honest in business, you're going to have to act like you really want to do business. You're going to have to speak the language of Esav, right? That's not why you're doing it. The reason why you're speaking the language of Esav, which means you know all the jargon of whatever industry you're in, you're wearing Esav's clothes at that time. You're not wearing it because you want to be an expert in that jargon and do well. You're doing that so that you can successfully go into the world and transform it. There's I'll tell a story. We have a couple minutes. I'll tell a story of like the idea that you had certain students. I'm kind of like such a student where they came from non-religious backgrounds. and they went to the Chabad yeshiva and changed their life. This phenomenon is called a Baal Tshuva, right? They became a Baal Tshuva. And so in many cases, the people found yeshiva and this change of life when they were right in the middle or even at the end of an academic career, right? They were students in a university somewhere. They took a spring break to go learn yeshiva, and one spring break becomes a year, becomes 2, becomes 3, and now they're ready to be a rabbi, and then they asked the Rebbe, what should I do? So in many cases, the Rebbe told people, don't be a rabbi. Better you should go back to the university where you came from, finish your studies there, and get involved in your field. So you had like a famous scientist, Belville Green, who worked in NASA. He was the Jet Propulsion Lab. He was a physicist, and he worked, or biologist rather. He worked in biology of like raising plants and things in space. So he worked for NASA, and he was a Baal Tshuva, and the Rebbe told him, keep going in your work. Now, why? The Rebbe said that there's a whole world of people that live in academia. They live in the university, or they are at NASA, the scientists, and type of things. And if a rabbi would just come to them with a lesson, they're too busy. They can't hear the words of a rabbi right now. You're not getting an appointment with the head of the Jet Propulsion Lab, so you can tell them about 10-minute Dvar Torah, and how he should change his life. But if you have a voice from your academic accomplishments, and you have a way to get into these circles, then you have an opportunity to talk to them and to make an impression. So many times I would encourage people, even though they wanted very much to become rabbis, no, you have to continue in your path, because now you have a unique access into a whole world which a rabbi will never reach. That's what we mean by putting on the clothes of Esau.
But it doesn't change the fact that he's a rabbi.
Right.
And everything, his approach, his presentation, it's still going to be based on what he really is.
Right. So let's take the word rabbi out and just replace it with the word soul. Each and every one of us has a soul. And each and every one of us, maybe we are on different levels of education and different levels of practice saying the words, but each and every one of us, by merit of having this holy soul inside of us, has this yearning, this mission to change the world. And the Rebbe said, fixing with the Rebbe's instructions, the Rebbe said that if you know Aleph, then teach Aleph. So this is an answer which is commonly quoted from the Rebbe, where the person says, how could I go out and change the world? I barely know Aleph base. The Rebbe starts at the very first letter. But if you know Aleph, then that you can go and teach. So that's the lesson. The lesson is to...
This was a difficult lesson for me. It really was, because, nations bargain for peace.